On this podcast, you'll find interviews with high-performing, successful individuals in life sciences. On a weekly basis, we cover their proven methods, principles, strategies, and mindsets to implement new technologies that scale to meet the needs of people in our world.
Welcome to the Life Science Success Podcast. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Don, and I'm a consultant in life sciences, and I help companies overall take a look at their overall broken processes and take out inefficiencies so that their revenue is more profitable. And the companies that I typically help are pharmaceutical companies, medical device companies, and biotech companies, and you can see a list of the services that we offer here. So with that, today I wanted to welcome, I have three guests today, not a common thing for me, but three guests from Indegene. And I want to welcome Jeff, Nancy, and Kevin to the podcast. Welcome. And it looks like you were muted. Sorry about that. I'm not sure what's happening. For those of you who are frequently, watching or listening to the show, this is the second time that this has happened on this. So hopefully this doesn't continue, but we're having some technical difficulties on my end, it looks like at this point. So I'm joining the crowd of individuals today that had challenges getting into the podcast. So welcome again.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
Thank you. Absolutely.
Thanks a lot. So, Jeff, why don't we start with you? And, could you just tell us a little bit about, your background and sort of what it is that led you to Indegene?
Absolutely. So, I think I'm probably the least traditional or maybe the most unexpected person to end up here. I actually started my career in entertainment in the film industry. I'm a film school brat from my youthful days, and it really focused on narrative and storytelling, screenwriting. I produced some small things, but made my way into marketing and advertising, and really became fascinated with the way that we could use storytelling to get people engaged with brands and how we can kind of build brand worlds around these narratives. So that's been a fun career. I've spent much of my early time in advertising in just general consumer advertising, nothing to do with healthcare, and then started a small advertising agency called Cult 360. And we did a lot of different types of work. We worked a lot in the spirits and alcohol industry and entertainment industry. But we were very interested in healthcare, and I'll be honest. I mean, we just saw it kind of as a financially smart thing to do. There was nothing more high-minded than that. We started Cult Health and built a team to really focus on life sciences. And I'll say that it didn't take long before it went from being kind of a good business opportunity to becoming what I think is really a life's calling. I understood why so many of my colleagues have made their way here and have really found rewarding careers. I mean, when you spend a lot of time trying to get someone to buy one car versus another car, at the end of the day, you question what your contribution is. You might be doing some good work and having a good time doing it, but it's hard to understand what your impact in the world has been. And after we'd done a program, a commercial for a company called Novo Nordisk, who now has really kind of exploded over the last decade that we've been working with them, but they had not done TV advertising in any substantial way before we started working with them. And we did a promotion really about their FlexPen pre-filled insulin pen device, right? So they were just trying to get people off of vial and syringe insulin and using the pre-filled pens. And what we found was, as we started running these commercials, Novo's data and analytics group met with us to talk about the results of the campaign. And they were telling us that they were seeing thousands and thousands, and at a certain point it hit into the hundreds of thousands of people were actually initiating insulin therapy. And this is, going back about 12 years ago, before all of the GLP-1s and pre-insulins that we talk about now. But they were saying people who had not been getting great control over their health were now actually getting better control over their health because of the commercials that we did. And I think that just changed everything for me at that point. I'm like, what an amazing feeling to feel like you can have a large scale impact on so many people and help them live just healthier lives and all of the benefits that come along with that.
So important. And I mean, storytelling is something that I don't think that is very common inside of, a lot of the science industries. And then, having people that can help to tell the story and, sort of extract that from people is so important. So why don't we go to you next, Nancy? And could you just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure, happy to. Nice to be here today. And I came to life sciences intentionally. I came here because I saw very early in my life the magic of medicine, and I wanted to be part of that. And so I, have been in the industry about 30 years. I joined Indegene about 2 years ago. I head up our practice that's really about bringing an innovative way to solve how to connect with HCPs and how to do it in a more personalized, relevant, data-driven way. And I intentionally joined industry, like I said, because I really do believe in the magic of medicine. And I was very fortunate to have a wonderful career, but it was a more traditional career. Started in sales, then I went into marketing. And what I was seeing is that when although there were wonderful medications, actually the market started to change with the introduction of the internet and new buying patterns that were happening out in the market. It actually was important that although you could have amazing products, you actually needed to better understand and connect data and digital, because actually accessing medication or having medication wasn't enough. And so that really started to change kind of the way I thought about how you commercialize and how you launch and how you go into market. And that ultimately was like a trigger for how I arrived at Indegene. And when I think back to early in my career, launching, blockbusters like Claritin, Clarinex, Nasonex, Vytorin, it was really easy, right? You needed a lot of reps and you needed a lot of TV, and it really worked. But then when I think about some of the more recent launches that I've been privileged to be a part of, whether they're in the US, whether they're in Europe, or whether they're in Asia, it is a far more complex, data digitally driven effort. And so that requires different skills. And I think that we're still in various phases of maturity of understanding these things. We really understand the rep model. We really understand the DTC model. And I was part of a pioneering group that actually helped figure that out. But today, that's why I'm here, because I think some of the new ways that we go to market and have success require a fundamentally different set of skills and insights, and they will be data driven. And that is where AI can really simplify these complex data sets, help you find trends and help you find success. And so hopefully that gives you a sense about who I am and my purpose and passion. And it's ultimately to make the great medications that this industry does over and over and over again actually accessible and reachable by the patients, by the physicians, and importantly by the caregivers who are counting on us to bring them forward.
Yeah, I think the concept that you talked about as well in terms of the TV commercials and sort of, directing, kind of where people are focusing in terms of their healthcare and their health is so important. And oftentimes I feel it's funny to me how many times I walk past the TV and the same commercial is running, right? And it's almost like we get flooded with the same commercial over and over again, almost like, hey, look, if we beat it into you, maybe you'll hear our message. But at the same time, making them, entertaining and informative and all of that stuff is, got to be complex as well to just direct our attention.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a reach and frequency method to it, but also the importance of finding a way to communicate what usually is very complex science and sophisticated advancements in a simple way that connects to people. And storytelling, like Jeff said, can be very effective. And there's nothing better for doing that than combining visual and auditory. You can do it in a TV ad, you can do it in video, you can do it in multi forms. And I think that's what we're trying to do, is how to figure out, and it's different in healthcare than it is in something like a CPG. How do you do that well so that it doesn't trivialize what someone is experiencing, and connects to them in both a rational and emotional way. It's
Absolutely.
part of science.
And Kevin, why don't we go to you? So would you mind telling listeners just a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Glad to be on your program. My name's Kevin Patterson. My background is I'm a CPA by training. Began my career with Ernst & Young, working as one of the disciplines in the area of healthcare. Went from there, actually went to work with one of my clients on the provider side. So I've been in and out of public accounting a couple times, working really around the business of healthcare. About 22 years ago, I met my mentor, Dr. Mick Kalasa, and we formed a company, Medical Marketing Economics. And for the last 22 years, I've been working with companies around the area and the concept of value, specifically in how you capture that through the market access process. And about 2.5 years ago, I was privileged to join Indegene as they purchased our company. Today, we work really on the strategy side associated with how value is not only created, but how you start to understand the value in and of itself of the product, the different perspectives of how value is understood in the complex marketplace, and then how to go out and capture that. And that's where it's so nice to be able to work with Jeff and Nancy and the rest of Indegene, and really in this very complex communication that is the buying center of the healthcare system. It's one of the most complex decisions out there. So we spend a lot of time understanding how those decisions are made, the ability to communicate it, how value is created there, and moving there. And that's been the central part of my career. And that's what I do today.
Oh, very good. It's yeah, and it is always interesting as well to hear the different stories and the journey that people take to land on the the point that they are today in their career, especially whenever you come to healthcare, because oftentimes I feel like there's a tie for us personally, there's a tie for us professionally, there's a lot of different reasons why many of us sort of take this journey that we take along the way as well.
It's hard to work in healthcare for a period of time and it not become a passion. I think that's one of the commonalities that we find when we're out there, regardless of whether I'm in med tech or pharma, academia, the providers, obviously, people are passionate about it. It's a personal issue. And that's one of the things that we strive to do. And if you don't have that kind of indwelling in you, that's when you start to become cynical. But the reality is, it's an awesome field to be in. It's a wonderful place to be, to know that you're helping wherever you are in that continuum of care. It's a great place to be.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I would have to think too, it's nice to be tied to those points in medicine that are new and coming of age at this point in time as well. I mean, when Jeff was talking about the having an insulin pen, dose more accurate medicine is a, pretty, important thing to have for anybody that's a diabetic that's out in the world as well. And just such an important tie. Nancy, I wanted to come back to you. So, with over 25 years in biopharma, how has the landscape for commercial strategy and operations evolved, and particularly with the advent of digital and omni-channel solutions?
Thanks for the question. I don't think we have enough time on the podcast to cover everything, so I'll try and keep it at a high level. But it's changed really significantly. It's I think if I go back even 15 years, if you go back much further, it's even more simple. About 15 years, it was a fairly simple thing, right? When we would go into commercialization, you would have an HCP led effort, a payer led effort. Consumer would come on sometime down the road, and then there was this digital thing that everybody knew they had to do, and it was kind of like off on the side, and it was like, oh wait, we need an innovation tactic for the launch because we got a review. And so we're going to think about digital. It was not integrated. And so as a consequence of that, I think that sometimes we had some misses in terms of some of our, executions. What we're seeing now is that in every facet of our business, when we're trying to connect to customers, when we're trying to connect to markets, there is a data stream that can be derived when you lead with a digital first effort. And so what's really, really shifting is our ability to get really granular data, but then our ability to understand and action it sometimes isn't always keeping pace. What we've done, what Jeff, Kevin, and I have done at Indegene is we're building a practice around what we understand is critical for a launch success. And one of the things that we're seeing is that a consistent theme is you can have an outstanding strategy, but with the complexity that's happening in the market, there's big gaps in terms of your ability to actually execute against your strategy, given the increasing number of stakeholders and the increase in the use of data and digital. And so that is something that is really, really critical, is to close the gap, if you will, the chasm between strategy and execution. What I'm excited about is that when you embrace these new approaches, you can absolutely find better ways to invest and make your resource allocation so that you can derive value and connect to customers, to connect to segments in a much more personalized and relevant way. And that's really, really important because getting these products through the clinical development phase takes a significant amount of investment. And we want to make sure, and we're committed not only to success, but finding ways to be more efficient and more effective using digital, using data. But it's only possible if you include it as part of your integrated go-to-market model, as opposed to something that's sitting off on the side and added as an innovative approach, quote unquote.
Yeah, I've been a part of a few different conversations with, different product launch teams as well, where they, sort of are trying to figure out, like, how do we weave this thing in? And realistically, it needs to be a part of, the ongoing strategy. Otherwise, it gets lost as a side element as well.
Absolutely. That's the struggle. And it absolutely has to be central and part of everything that you do. Doesn't matter who you're trying to reach. I don't know of a single person that doesn't use digital tools to run their life. And so
Mm.
why is it that we think that when it comes to healthcare, that they act differently? It's just absolutely not backed by data. It does require us to operate a little bit differently. And that's the challenge, change management.
Absolutely. So, Jeff, I wanted to focus a little bit on your integration of Cult Health to Indegene because, I have a lot of different elements of a small digital media marketing company myself, and it's always interesting to me to hear kind of the journey that companies take, especially whenever they're being integrated into such a large company. So, just was curious in terms of your lessons learned and anything that you might want to bring to light in terms of the integration.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what I'll look at, maybe the way I may approach this is a little bit on looking at what we were thinking for our customers and how we service, and maybe a little bit less on ourselves. But the quick philosophy that was driving us, even though we started to build a reputation, get well known for the bigger TV work that we were doing in the industry. The way we described ourselves was that we did two things for brands. We built belief systems around brands, and then we used technologically empowered communications channels to engage our audiences in terms of building these belief systems with them. So being able to use technology and digital communications was really foundational to the way we were thinking about building brands. And as a small company, it was very difficult to really achieve that at any level of scale. You need much more investment. You need much more resources and capabilities. And when we were introduced to Indegene, it you couldn't have seen a better partnership in my mind, because they they'd created this fabulous end-to-end capability. I mean, I joined really to be able to work with Nancy and Kevin. They represent, a big slice of this end-to-end capability and what we can do, and yet it goes on and on. I mean, we could add box after box after box on the screen right now of people who contribute different aspects of commercialization, all digitally empowered. And the one thing that Indegene wasn't really doing was what Cult Health was doing, which is the brand advertising and strategy and the creative portion of that. And so we fit in nicely for them. They expanded our digital capabilities, and suddenly our ability to communicate on this digital level in the way that Nancy was just talking about, it just transformed the way that we approach our jobs. So, when Nancy is talking about all of the data that we can use to find people, to reach people, make sure that we're connecting with them the way that they want to be connected with. Well, I need to make sure while Nancy's doing that, I need to make sure that now that narrative is not just that one common narrative that works for the most massive audience that we can achieve, but how does each individual want to build that story for themselves? And that's the era that we live in. It is all about customization and personalization. So how can we create the content and the modularity and the pieces of that can assemble technologically, that just feel like magical storytelling that was designed for you, that each one of us has our own personal experience that way.
Yeah, it's so important to know the level of additional capability oftentimes that's gained through the right integration when it's the right fit at the right time. And it sounds like to me that for Cult Health, Indegene was very much, that along your journey.
And it's just really beginning, because I think that what we're finding is there's so much opportunity. I think we're just scratching the surface right now
Mm.
of what we're going to be able to do. If we come back on this show even a year from now, Nancy was talking about generative AI and how that's starting to transform. All three of us are using that substantially in the work that we do. A year from now, I I don't know how it will be different, but I can guarantee it will be dramatically different in terms of what we're doing and what we're able to accomplish.
Yeah. So also true. I mean, it's amazing to see, the impact of the tools that are coming about. And I know there was a fair amount of resistance, at least in the copywriters and marketers that I initially would talk to about AI and sort of the thoughts of the future. But I think it'll be interesting to get a little bit deeper into that as we talk a little bit more about your experiences with product launches in just a little bit. So for Kevin, for you in your role, how do you navigate the complexities of, say, healthcare institutions, and particularly in terms of pricing and marketing in the specialty and oncology hematology markets?
Well, it's just evolving so quickly, and it still begins with the underlying technologies that are coming out of our pipeline right now. So, what we're seeing is a change from traditional chemotherapy and some of the other options that are there, and we're moving to advanced therapies at such a rapid pace that it's really changing how uh, healthcare organizations at the provider level are starting to receive and implement this. And I'll just use an example like CAR Ts. What we have is in my career, we've gone from we want to go and we want to treat cancer and we want to slow progression. Then we got to use the C word, but it wasn't cure, it was control. How are we able to control the cancer so that we can have a good quality of life? With CAR T, which obviously is a legacy off of stem cell transplant, we're now starting to see some 5-year outcomes in multiple myeloma and moving towards more solid tumors, moving into autoimmune. And when you see this, our receptor sites and the way that we're going to have to engage as a pharmaceutical company is going to change rather drastically, because the information coming in is quick. Where the site of service is going to be is going to evolve through the life cycle of the product. And you have a major change from a regulatory perspective in the IRA, which is not just a US centric piece of legislation, is going to have global effect on how value is going to be captured, but just as importantly, how we're going to develop assets and launch them into the marketplace. The idea of having an asset like an old biological, and I'll pick on rituximab, that's going to have a very long life with many indications, which has been just one of those, it's hard to overstate the importance of that product. But under IRA, it would have been a biosimilar or would have had negotiation well before it got to several of its indications, which is going to change philosophically how pharma is going to deal with that and how they're going to develop it. It's going to expand options. All of those things are going to have to be received by these healthcare institutions. I'm now dealing with multiple therapies in this complex area. There's 40 CAR Ts. There's, as you look at it, you look at gene therapy. And so all of this complexity, which we've done a really good job, particularly, and I'll focus on the US, of moving from the most expensive side of service, the health institution, into community-based care. You're seeing that revert with some of these, and now we're going through another micro process of how to move them into outpatient and have even a more integrated approach with a community-based care, but with hospital support. That's all evolving right before our eyes. And so the complexity, use of data, being able to track what's happening, being able to use real world evidence has become more a part, not just of how we're looking to see what the market is going, but how and start to predict how the market may move, how to work with adoption, and how to really embolden and provide resources to our community providers, because that's happening from manufacturers of all state right now. Pharma, med tech, other industries are coming into the healthcare arena, bringing this technology, and we're having to supply our healthcare system, which came out of a pretty stressful situation just a couple of years ago. So when you look at those, you see this really heavy evolution. It's a great time to be there. And I was just sitting with the CEO of an oncology group just this past week, and this is the exact conversation we were having. How am I going to start to bring this in that has been focused in academia? It's time for that to evolve into the community, both at the hospital and the community oncology level, so that it can be cleared to do more esoteric research that we need to start to bring this in and go through that process. And they're struggling with this because they know as soon as they capture this, they're going to see the next one right on the horizon. So it's really moving at light speed, where we would say for years, oh, it's not moving that quickly. We don't say that anymore. Today, we're saying it's moving so fast. How are we going to keep up?
Yeah, also true. And it feels like the there's challenges, but there's also evolution, right? So the challenges, are naturally put in place, the regulations, the, price constraints, the economy that we're currently dealing with out in the world. Those things, are going to continue to happen over and over again. But in addition to that, I feel like there's this evolution of, and, to bring this back to AI for a second, we have the evolution now of AI sort of, helping with drug development and other things. And I could only imagine, the additional complexities that will come from that as well, Kevin.
Absolutely. Still, the single best way to drive prices down is competition. There's no question. It's still the best way to do it is if I have therapeutic options. We see that happening in the marketplace, and that's great. However, what we also see is the ability to deliver medicine in different sites of service using technology and to communicate it more effectively. Back to what Nancy and Jeff have been doing are going to be so critical. Literally, the way that we consume information has changed in the last 3 to 4 years. We were forced to because we weren't able to do interperson communication as easily. We were having to start to rely on technology. Well, guess what? The market adopted. We're going to have to be there, and we're going to have to communicate across many different areas. The second part is a generational change. The professionals that are coming in have never really experienced a world where they didn't have a personalized medicine and a personalized device that allowed them access to a huge amount of information, and it's customized to a certain extent. We've got to evolve with that. And that's what Jeff and Nancy are able to bring. So the first is finding what's value and then put it in a format that they can consume it easily so it changes healthcare decisions. The market's ready for that. They're asking for that. If you look at the literature, and pharma is moving through that in their launch process. They're having to.
Also true. And as a part of any live show, it looks like we've lost Nancy, unfortunately, just temporarily, hopefully. And as soon as she's back, I'll add her back to the show here. But I wanted to ask you, since you're both here, Jeff and Kevin, can you share a memorable experience or significant challenge that you faced during a product launch in the biopharma industry?
Uh, oh, which one to pick? Kevin. Well, Kevin, do you want to jump in, or you'd like me to?
I'll let you go, and I'll add a story as well.
Sure. Well, you know, one of my favorite launches to talk about is Ozempic, which now has become I would say, a pretty well-known brand. When we were doing market research in preparation to launch the brand, there was a lot of reason to be somewhat anxious about the launch of this. We were going to be, I think it was either the eighth or ninth to market in our class. Prescribers were pretty satisfied with the options that they had. Patients were doing well on a variety of different medications, and we were doing, we were putting data in front of prescribers, and they were saying, "Yeah, looks good. I'll have to see how it works with my patient population," but it. There was nothing that seemed really exciting. Nobody seemed really ready to start transitioning from their current therapies to an Ozempic. And it's easy right now to look at the success of the overarching creative campaign and the TV work that came out of the OOO Ozempic campaign, and people attribute a lot of the recognition to that. But before the TV campaign even launched, we were looking at this critical intersection of the physician-patient dialogue and how we could play a part in that, and what could we do to accelerate the physician's experience in prescribing this. And so what we did was we actually we invented a text messaging platform specifically designed for the complexities of pharmaceutical marketing, so that we could have direct brand text engagement between the brand and the patient. So we were providing motivational information. For many patients, it was the first time they were self-injecting, so they needed some onboarding advice and guidance through that. But we were also asking for information about how the therapy was working for them. We could collect data from them and report that back to their prescribers. And so by creating this dialogue with the patients, collecting data, feeding that back to the prescribers sooner than they would actually see the patient, they got a chance to see how the people were dealing with it. They were losing weight. They were getting their blood sugar under control. They were really adapting to therapy very well. It actually increased the uptake of the brand very well. So the going in on the challenge of it was, we just didn't know if we were going to be able to break through at all. And even before the TV campaign came out, the ability to use this technologically empowered communication, really driving more dialogue between patient and physician, became one of the most important parts of overcoming that.
It's so true that the piecing all of these things together just can't be easy either on your end, right? I mean, there's got to be a lot of observing and then sort of reacting. Is that kind of how you see things evolve, or do you sort of set things for a campaign in place and then let it run for a while and then make changes, I guess, for a secondary campaign? How does it typically work in that sense?
Well, that's such a fascinating question, because there was a point not too many years ago where, yeah, you effectively set your campaign, you put it out in the world, and you just waited to see what happens, and maybe you'd iterate on that, but it was a very painstaking, lengthy process. Now, if we're looking at TV work, that's going to endure a little bit longer. So we need to develop stuff that's going to be out there. But the bulk of communications now is not that. It is the content that we're able to deliver to people in so many different forms and make it really consumable, make it much more on demand and much more personalized. And so, yeah, that we're getting, as Nancy was describing, we're getting so much data that we're able to adapt to that very quickly. And we're learning how to adapt at that speed. And Kevin was speaking to that as well, that it is this, we're now having to work faster than we ever have to keep up with the opportunities that keep getting presented.
I
Well,
hope it's okay just to pile on, if I may, and hopefully you
sure.
can hear me.
Yes.
I think one of the things that, just to build off of it, I think that with the use of AI, you can intentionally set that over your data, and that can find the trends for you. And intentionally using AI and building models is absolutely critical. Where we what Basically, we get information back on a very, very regular basis on content preferences, channel preferences, device preferences. It helps us deliver a better experience, but we can't do anything with this unless we've got really unless people have the ability to make decisions quickly. And so I think that's the thing that's really not yet kept pace. So when you don't get a lot of data and when you're mostly manual, it's terrific to have an annual brand planning process, right? Because you make decisions on an annual basis. Maybe you do a POA every 3 to 6 months and you make some changes. But in today's world, that's simply insufficient. You're constantly getting data. It allows you to make changes, make choices, and you've got to be able to work in a much more agile way. And so this requires decision making being pushed down in organizations, and really embracing the use of AI to be able to see those trends. Because if you just leave it to people, it's not going to result in the impact that it should.
Yeah, it ties to my other question for you, Nancy, which is really, how do you make sure that you include this idea of using digital strategies inside of a product launch to enhance its reach and effectiveness?
It's a great question. And I'd say if you're really thinking about an effective product launch, it starts with the customer. The customer could be an HCP, the customer could be a patient, the customer could be a consumer, a caregiver, rather, a payer. You need to start with an understanding of the customer. And if you start with an understanding of the customer and you understand and map out their journeys and map out their barriers and their drivers, and you think about ways that you can solution it, you're absolutely going to identify digital as a key component to that. So it's really a difference around, do you go into launch with an intentional external view where you focus your effort on understanding the external customers in the markets? Or do you approach your launch readiness from an internal view? And an internal view will never deliver, because an internal review says, I've got sales, I've got marketing, I've got operations, I've got payer, I've got medical. They're going to go do their thing. And you're going to hope that somehow it all serendipitously comes together, and you're going to have lots of effort around that. That's just not going to set you up for success. In that scenario, that's where you see, oh, we got to do something digital. Let's go do something innovative and throw in some digital. So our point of view is, you've got to go outside. You've got to look at the customers. You got to look at the markets, and then you go and you do what's right. And digital is not to replace reps. It is not to replace people. It is actually to deliver a better integrated experience, because what we know, Kevin's talked about a lot of changes that are happening in institutions with with healthcare. What we know is that our customers do need to connect with us, but there's some real changes that are limiting their ability about how and when. Digital is always on; it's 24/7, and sadly, people are always sick. So healthcare happens outside of the 9 to 5 working hours, and so we simply have to embrace it and use it to its full potential.
Also true. Kevin, I wanted to ask you in terms of market access and the market access landscape. Whenever you're launching a new product, how important is it to consider market access, as a part of your planning?
Oh, it's critical. And part of it is how you're going to define market access. We define it pretty simply: patient on drug. It's a real simple definition, but it is the pull through of what happens. So when we talk about the decision that and beginning to orient a market and communicate what's going on in a market, one of the things that's important for the manufacturer and what we do and we help is really start to move information from A to B in an effective way. And some of that is education, some of that is trending, some of that is results of what's happening, what's working, and bringing all that. Uh, Manufacturing institutions have taken on a much disproportionate share of that than people realize in the American public. The ability for them to move that information around. That results in how they're going to interact from a market access perspective. So, one of the things that's happening in market access is a lot of people get to the end and they think, how am I going to deal with my payers? How am I going to get my formulary? How is it going to be managed? And what the trend is started and continuing is those questions need to be asked in phase 1, phase 2 of clinical development, because what's coming out when we see it in our results from our study is market access is one of the key issues that they worry about. They don't have satisfactory market access at the time of launch. That didn't happen 24 months before launch. That happened as a result of what was going on in the market, the positioning exercises that Nancy and Jeff were talking about understanding that value, a maturity of how to communicate that information. And we've talked about, Nancy described the buying center perfectly, to whom I'm talking to and the value they perceive that comes in from that market. The way a payer looks at a market, the way a provider looks at the market, an institutional versus an individual, and then the rest all have different value concepts. They're all receiving different things. They also have different authority inside this process of how this decision is made. That's market access. How do you go through and work through those channels? And then how do you effectively communicate into those channels what's going on? Sometimes it's to deliver a hard message. Sometimes it's to go in to educate. Sometimes it's to put people together so that they communicate more effectively. That's a huge part of market access. How do I get payers, physicians, and patients to communicate effectively so that the right patient can get the right care at the right time? That's really what we're all trying to do here in the different aspects. So that's where it comes to a head. The explosion of data in a more real-time fashion allows us to work back with the marketer, work back with Nancy on OA, and start to say, okay, how is the effectiveness of this message? Let's use payers as an example. How is that my contract that's out there? How is it being pulled through? What is the perception of the physician? How are claims being adjudicated so that they can use AI, they can use this information to refocus reps and communication, to change the communication on a dime to say, hey, last week you did not have access to this medication. This week you do. That's a big difference in how to change, and the light speed of which that occurred when I started, that took 6 months. Now we're able to do that depending on the feed that's coming through. So you see this monumental change in the speed of how that works. But just as importantly, we're learning how to apply it more efficiently. The point is to get back to at the end of the day, we're in the people business. That's healthcare is the people business, using tools that are out there. Market access is putting people together, communicating, and making sure that when it's time at the point of care, that physician has all the liberty they need and the tools they need to be able to really engage with that patient. And the patient has the ability to receive it. So that's changing a great deal with legislation that's going through. It creates more obstacles, but we're creating more tools to get around those obstacles. It's still improving, and that's a nice thing to see as part of these trends.
Also important. So Jeff, I wanted to focus a little bit on your background and area again in terms of building a brand. How does that play into product launch, and how do you leverage your agency's marketing innovations in the process?
Well, so I think that the branding aspect is really more critical than ever. It's from the beginning of product marketing. The concept of branding, I think, has been really integral to that. But in healthcare right now, we're seeing more and more therapies coming to market now than I think at any other time in history. So the number of launches coming out just keeps going up and going up, and many of them are struggling in so many ways. And so we're seeing, on average over the course of 1 or 2 years, um, upwards of 50% of brands aren't actually achieving the success goals that they've been telling the market to expect. There's a variety of factors that go into that, but up front, I think one of the reasons that Nancy and Kevin and I work so closely on a daily basis is so many of these things need to come together in perfect harmony in order to really achieve the maximum value out of your launch. And I will say that the role that we play, that there's a level of sophistication, I think, in the area that Nancy oversees, and Kevin as well. And sometimes our team feels a little like we're making pretty pictures and words, but in reality, the branding component of this is critical right from the beginning, because if we cannot establish a differentiation between everything else that is in the market, then all of the data and all of the omni-channel excellence that Nancy's team can bring to those communications and delivering, it's going to fail to land. And then, of course, if we make all of that work, but when the prescriber wants to write the drug or the patient wants to get it, and they don't have the market access there, it just falls apart. All of our marketing efforts fall apart over there. So all of this needs to work in great harmony. But I do think that the branding component, being able to understand what differentiates us, is so critical. And I talked about beliefs as being a core part of the way that we approach branding, and we feel that there's a lot of education out there. I don't think that doctors are lacking education in a lot of the therapies that they have, and yet they don't always prescribe the way that we think they would. If we feel if they just understood this data point, they would prescribe this all the time. They do understand the data point, and they don't. And what's happening is we say we're not solving for education gaps, we're solving for belief gaps, that there are
Mm.
deep-seated beliefs that impact your actual behavior in the market. And the belief gaps come when you know one thing and you believe something else. And you can have a lot of fun with those types of statements, but it's a great strategic tool for finding the insights that let us start to break through those obstacles that you have on beliefs.
It's your last point is so important though, because I have a sales coach as well. I mean, I'm not very good at sales. This is something that I've been working on myself for quite some time now. And one of the things that the sales coach has said is, look, you like to apply your logical mind, thinking that people make decisions based on logic. The reality is most of us make decisions based on emotion. And so getting a hold of that emotional piece that actually sort of will help us make the final decision and pull together our portion of the logic as well is important. And we kind of especially you'd think in healthcare again that everybody's going to make a decision based on logic and the science that is behind it, but the reality is there's still that emotional tie that oftentimes at least guys like me would often overlook.
It is all emotional, and yeah, you're absolutely right. You think there's so much that would make you think that all of these decisions can be rational, and we're just finding that we want people to engage in a brand narrative. We want them to have a belief in something, and they'll actually there'll be all sorts of variability in different therapies, but the number one thing is, if somebody really believes in what they're doing, they're going to go onto therapy optimistically, and they're going to stick on it. And I would rather have somebody stick on something for the time that their doctor thinks that they should be, because they really believe that it's working for them. And if they don't, we just see people drop off of really life saving, life helping therapies, because they just lose that momentum and belief.
Also true.
I'd
So
like to,
go
can
ahead,
I add
Kevin.
one thing
Yeah.
to that? There's one thing that I think is important in this, and it really involves all three of our perspectives as well, in the way we engage the market. Is a lot of times what we're doing and what he's doing is we're really trying to change perspective, because in the area of prescribing, perspective is their reality. It's not that they don't have facts. And I'm going to take it a step beyond belief. There are other things, including belief being one of them, but the restrictions, effort, the emotional value, the clinical belief is certainly a big part of it. But what do they do in the functional work style of how they go about their business in order to deal and manage their day? All of those are a part of what we're measuring when we're going out and talking about how these decisions are made. Those are the influence points that we're focusing on and that have become more nuanced over the years. And that takes multiple forms of communication and different perspectives of communication so that you can change that behavior.
Also important. So I want to try and keep the next couple of questions just semi-briefly. So the looking ahead, what this is for all of you, what emerging trends or technologies do you believe will have the most significant impact on product launches in our industry?
So there's no way you can launch a product in the future, even today, without having a far greater data set, and far both prior to launch from coming out of the clinic and then also going into the market. And so it's going to be absolutely critical to embrace the use of machine learning, artificial intelligence to really help find trends, manage all that data and the complexity. And I think what Jeff shared is that there's also Gen AI is absolutely going to be a significant game changer. We're very much early days at Indegene. We've got 36 active proof of concepts. I wouldn't say they're experiments, active proof of concepts that's allowing us to learn hands-on. It's extraordinary what this could potentially do. And so I think there's real changes in the technology landscape. There's also changes in terms of the data and privacy landscape, which we're going to have to continue to stay in front of. So I think these are some big trends. Trying to be concise, like you asked.
Thank you for that. I appreciate it. Kevin or Jeff, do you have anything to add? If not, I have 3 questions to end the interview here, but just really quickly for you.
I would add 2 things. I think the legislative reform is going to have a material impact of what's going on. Obviously, you can't overstate the effect on IRA, and I'm not just talking about pricing, but I'm really thinking about clinical development and what that means. I think that's one. The second is when you talk about it on a global aspect, what we do in many cases, focusing on the individual and advanced needs. COVID actually started to change governmental minds around community health and public health in a different way. So you're seeing a change in the allocation and focus of where dollars are going if we start to expand this into a global conversation. So those will be things that need to be understood as we start to think through clinical development, how they're going to be received into the marketplace, and the change in the perception of value. Oncology's been the focus for years. Now we're dealing with communicative diseases in a different way after the recency of COVID.
Also true. Jeff, anything else from you? If not, I've got my final 3. So,
Sure. Well, one quick thought is again, it's Gen AI related, but what we're able to do now in terms of visual storytelling, which becomes a big way that people like to get information, learn, and it's very powerful in shaping those beliefs. The gap between ideation and execution is now shrinking to almost minuscule timeframes. So we can get better information, better communication out there much faster and create much more influence and much more personalization than we ever could before. And I think we're going to see that put great effect.
Yeah, also true. Thank you all for sharing that. So, Nancy, why don't we start with you? And I'm going to ask this question of all 3 of you. So, what inspires you?
Oh, thanks for the question. It's great. So I'm inspired by the potential to leave a legacy that said that I was part of teams like Jeff and Kevin and part of the Indegene team and teams that I've been on before that have changed the status quo in terms of healthcare delivery. That motivates me every single day. I'm a super user of healthcare. I've taken care of people that I love very dearly. And I believe the magic of medicine, but accessing it is really difficult. So that every day I get up saying we gotta leave our mark. We gotta make it better.
Yeah, absolutely. Kevin, what inspires you?
I just love the innovation. I love learning. I love seeing what it's doing. As I get older, these advancements in technologies become more important. There's a little bit of motivation there. So, but truly, it is the ability to go out and get paid to learn and to work and do good with this. That really is just, it's almost like a calling. And so I see that with a lot of my colleagues.
Thank you for sharing that. And Jeff, what inspires you?
I've become kind of a science geek that I wish I could go back to high school and college and retake some classes because I might do better now. But learning about medicines and molecular development and new types of gene therapies is so fascinating to me. I think it has so much promise for humanity. And I'm excited that we get to play a role in helping people to understand that because, as a big theme of what we've been talking about, it's difficult to make these types of decisions. They're not always rationally based. And so, helping people to come to good conclusions about all of the great healthcare options that keep coming out is just an exciting thing to do.
Also true. Nancy, what concerns you?
That's I think what I wouldn't say it's a concern. I'm actually a real optimist. I think one of the potential barriers is people's ability to adapt and change, and it's a challenge as old as time.
Yeah, it's also true. Our ability to keep up with the pace of changes coming at us as well. Kevin, what concerns you?
I think it's probably a similar concept. The idea of expectation for people, I think, is the other, because when we're going through this innovation, we still have to be patient. We're still chasing nirvana to a certain extent as we're going through this. We have to do this a step at a time. And while innovation is going quicker, we have to really appreciate where we are today and what's been accomplished, knowing that we're looking to the future, but being patient in this. COVID changed that expectation. The dissemination of that medicine is truly a miracle in several different aspects in the terms of being able to get something out to the market and deliver. And it set expectations that we think, oh, I can do this with every therapy. That's not true. So there's pros and cons to that as we go through it, but we are seeing major strides in being patient and also appreciating what's been done and the shoulders we've been on. We need to be sure we're careful to do that as well.
Absolutely. I mean, we absolutely became very fortunate that there was a lot of good research already in the field on, coronaviruses and spike proteins and lots of other things that we were all very fortunate of. Jeff, what concerns you?
Well, I would say that it's really around information, and as we've talked about how AI helps us create information faster and more credibly and get it out. Uh, that access to that is available to many people, and so you start to see different types of information reaching people. Some of it is more credible than others. Some of it is just outright wrong. And so I think that it makes it much more difficult for people to really understand what their options are and what would be the best path for them as they're trying to sort through all of this. So I think trying to figure out how do we help people understand the credibility of information and communication is going to be it's a challenge and it's a concern.
Yeah, I mean, the level of crafty misinformation is is
Yeah.
something that we could all see, be misused as well. So Nancy, back to you one last time. So what excites you? Did we lose Nancy?
I think we might have.
We might have. So Kevin, why don't we go to you? What excites you?
I think it's the same thing that inspires me. It's really synonymous there. What we see with the innovation coming out is nothing short of remarkable. The advancement in the where we work in the area of starting to communicate value, but seeing what's happening on the bench in the science and moving forward is amazing. When we see what they're doing with gene therapy, when we see what they're doing with these advanced therapies, and the way we're going about what our parents and grandparents suffered from that we're able to address directly, and we hope one day to address proactively. what a time to be in part of that. That's exciting to see how it's going. There's so much out there right now that it's hard to take it in. So I keep looking for, every time I say, oh, I wonder what the next greatest thing is going to be, I read the next article that comes out about a week later, and I'm like, this is amazing. I can't wait to see how this matures over time.
Yeah, absolutely. And Jeff, what excites you?
It's I think, quite frankly, it's everything. It's everything that we've been talking about here. That it is what the industry, the healthcare industry, is actually creating. The science behind that, the depth of understanding that we have medically and what we can do, but then on our side, what we're able to do in our role of commercializing products and communicating them. Every day there's something new. I mean, no day is a repeat of the day before for me, and that's just one of the most exciting things. Whether it's the products that we're working with or the internal products that we're creating to help commercialize those and communicate them, just the whole ecosystem of this is it's transforming. And how could you not find that exciting every day?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Jeff, Nancy, who we've lost again, and Kevin, thank you so much for being on the Life Science Success Podcast. I really appreciate you being here, and for just really helping us understand a lot more about what it takes and some of the journeys that a lot of companies take in terms of bringing their product to light. For many of us as patients, consumers, and healthcare givers. So, thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Enjoy it.
Thanks a lot. Thank you for listening to Life Science Success. For complete details about this podcast, including show notes, how to get in touch with guests, and more episodes, please visit www.lifesciencesuccess.com. If there's someone you'd like for us to invite to the show as a guest, please let me know by sending me a message at the podcast website. Please click subscribe on your favorite podcast app, share the podcast, or tell a friend about it. And last but not least, rate the podcast. Thank you again.